Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good morning to you wherever you are across the globe. You're welcome to the 2021 Accra SDGs Investment Fair. Because of the pandemic, we're having to hold this virtually. But again, let me state that this is day one of the virtual fair, and we're going to start a conversation with, I guess, three experts in health and vaccination on the era of vaccine nationalism, lessons to African leaders and the business community. Let me state again that the Accra SDGs Investment Fair is brought to you by the Ministry of Finance in Ghana, the Social Enterprise Ghana, the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, Impact Invest in Ghana, and the SDGs Advisory Unit, Office of the President of the Republic of Ghana. I should state again that I have a wonderful panel of three men or experts, as I said earlier, and I'm going to be introducing them right away. So let me start from the southern part of Africa. We have from South Africa, Aspen farmer, Dr. Stavros Nicolaou. Stavros is one of the big brains and big pharma in Africa. I have as well the presidential advisor on health and the former director general of the Ghana Health Service, Dr. Nsia Asare. Doc, you're welcome as well.
Thank you.
Again, great. Mr. Gregory Roxon, he is the co-founder and CEO of M-Pharma, a retail pharmacy operator, I suspect in 7 countries across Africa. Greg, if I'm not mistaken.
You and probably eight by now. So yeah.
Okay, nice to know that. And so, gentlemen, welcome once again to the 2021 Accra SDGs Investment Fair. As I indicated earlier, we're going to discuss vaccine nationalism and how that is impacting access to vaccines in Africa and vaccine deployment and delivery across the continent. So, if I may, it's been identified as, I guess, wealthy nations hoarding vaccines, and the IMF has indicated that it's one of the key drivers to the slow growth or the uneven global recovery. I mean, as of April this year, we know for a fact that the EU had ordered maybe 1.6 billion doses of vaccines. That's about 3.5 doses per person. Canada had ordered about 362 million doses of vaccines for their country. The UK had ordered about 367 million doses. But Africa seemed to be missing in the scheme of things, rather unfortunately. So I guess if I can start from South Africa, I want to understand how this phenomenon of vaccine nationalism is affecting access to and deployment of vaccines in South Africa. Dr. Stavros Nicolaou.
Right. Thanks very much, firstly, for the opportunity to participate in this exceedingly important conversation. It's important for many factors, including what you've mentioned, not least of which we have a public health crisis of unprecedented proportions. It's impacted significantly on both lives and livelihoods. And regrettably, as you put it, Africa has been at the back of the queue, both in terms of vaccinations, but also in terms of its ability to open up its economies and to trade with international trading partners. The quicker and the swifter you vaccinate huge swathes of your population, the sooner you can open up economic activity, restore some semblance of normality, and also start to lift the many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, on the continent that have now been mired in poverty as a consequence of the economic meltdown occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, Africa has regrettably limited vaccine manufacturing capacity, and he who holds the capacity is at the front of the queue, I'm afraid to say. And notwithstanding various solidarity initiatives, the statistics and the data tell us a completely different thing. As at today, which is the 20th of August, 4.6 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines have been administered globally. And it's a sad global indictment that Africa or African arms have received 2% or less of these. We are also saddled by various other problems, such as Africa currently imports 99% of its vaccine requirements. We produce 1% or less on the continent. And this is a continent that has the most disproportionate disease burden of any continent in the world. If anything, we should be producing a lot of our requirements, not importing them. And regrettably, as a consequence, we are using African volumes, which are significant. We have 1.3 billion fellow Africans on the continent. We are using those volumes to create markets elsewhere, to create jobs elsewhere, and economic activity elsewhere. The quickest way to restore some semblance of balance to this vaccine unevenness and inequality that we are witnessing globally is to expand our capabilities and capacities on the continent. This is precisely what Aspen has been doing and continues to work on. We have partnered with Johnson & Johnson. It has enabled through this partnership for Aspen to establish a minimum capacity of 300 million doses of Johnson & Johnson on the African continent. These doses, and we've only just got into production. I'm pleased to say that the first consignments for the African Union were delivered about 2 weeks ago and are now seemingly finding their way in African arms. So in conclusion, there's only one way to address this global inequality of vaccines. We cannot rely on these multilateral fora, unfortunately. They haven't worked. We have to, as African, build our own capabilities. We've proven we have the ability, and we now need to have the courage of our convictions and forge ahead and build various manufacturing hubs on the continent. And partnership models are the order of the day amongst African companies. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Stavros. You seem to have the solution, but we'll come to, I guess, the Africa's capacity to produce vaccines in a bit. Dr. Nziasari, let me come to you to understand how this hoarding of vaccines or vaccine nationalism has affected access to vaccines for the Ghanaian government. How is that affecting us? If you could kindly unmute, yes.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this very important conference or meeting. Yes, the hoarding of vaccines and vaccine nationalism and vaccine geopolitics is affecting us, especially in Ghana. To interest you to note that we've so far given about 1,414,000 doses of vaccines. AstraZeneca, some few Sputnik, and also recently Johnson & Johnson that we had from African Vaccine Acquisition Tax Team. As I speak, there are people who took AstraZeneca first dose as far back as 10th of March who are waiting for their second jab. We told them we give the second dose between the 8th to 12 weeks. We are still struggling for AstraZeneca, about 450,000 to be given to 450,000 people. God being so good, we recently have about 250,000 doses only 2 days ago that we are going to deploy to 250,000 of the 450,000 people. We still have an outstanding 200,000 doses to give. I've always been saying that we are not safe until everyone is safe. So the pandemic that we're having is a global pandemic, and I believe that we should fight it together. So we have a lot of vulnerable people in our population, especially in Ghana, where only about 5% of the adult population of our target to be vaccinated. So we have a lot of vulnerable people among the society, and we believe that if they get at least the doses that they need to immunize a lot of people as much as possible, then we can be safe. We are happy that we had the first batch of Johnson & Johnson, which is 177,000 that we got recently through the AU. And because it's only one dose, it's very convenient for our people, especially in the most deprived areas. You don't need to go and search for the person to come for the second dose. But the answer to all this is that we should be able to manufacture, if for nothing at all, fill and finish of vaccines in our sub-region. And luckily, His Excellency the President has charged a committee, which was formed recently, to work assiduously towards getting in the short term fill and finish plans in Ghana to be able to manufacture our own vaccines, not only for COVID vaccines, also for EPI vaccines. The story in Ghana is that we have a very robust, expanded program on immunization program, that any amount of vaccines that you get in this country, we can deploy it within the shortest possible time. Even during the pandemic in September last year, we were able to give 4 million children yellow fever vaccines within a matter of 5 days. We vaccinate from the community level up to the regional level. We have teams who are ready to give any vaccines that we get. So what is left for us to do in Ghana is the acquisition of the vaccines. And that's where the problem is. We started very well with the first doses of AstraZeneca that we got from Serum Institute of India. And after some time, India had a problem. And because there was no export from India, we were stuck until recently we got the Johnson & Johnson and a few doses of Sputnik V. So the question is, what do you do as a country? What you should do as a country is to position ourselves in such a way that we can manufacture our own vaccines. That's why we want to, in the short term, to have a fill and finish plant. In the short term, we have to also want to have our own anti-snake and anti-rabies vaccines so that we can give it to our people and when they are sick. And in the medium term, we want to move on to even manufacture our own vaccines. And in the long term, in about 10 years, we should be able to have our own candidate vaccine. So the committee set up together, which the president and the government has given a seed money of 25 million, is working towards this. We want to have a national vaccine institute, and we are going through all the processes to have this thing done. And this is what we believe can solve Africans' problem, so that we move from the 1% manufacturing of our vaccines and the 99% of them being imported into Africa to about 40% manufacturing and 60% maybe export. And Ghana is very well positioned to make sure that if for nothing at all, we become a vaccine manufacturing hub in the sub-region. I'll leave it here and then come back again. Thank you.
Okay, Doc. Thank you so much for those submissions. So it's not really, we have the capacity to deploy, but it's just a matter of having access to those vaccines to allow, I guess, the health system in Ghana to deploy. That's good to know. Greg, if I may come to you. I know you have tried at the start of the year to get into some public-private partnerships to understand how you could access COVID-19 vaccines for the private sector, those that had, I guess, the funding to be able to buy these vaccines to support their staff. I want to know from you how vaccine nationalism seems to be hampered this effort, or whether, how that has hampered your effort or your drive to get vaccines for the private sector.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Well, at the start of the year, one thing that we identified was going to be a challenge was that, yes, there was going to be huge demand for vaccines, but then the issue of financing of vaccines was going to be a big challenge. Traditionally, as we know, African governments have financed immunization programs in their country through financing from Gavi and multilateral donors. And in a situation where there was a disproportionate need of COVID vaccines, we realized that national budgets were going to be very constrained. So we put together a consortium of employers where we came together and said, you know what, actually vaccination is not just a health crisis, it is also a business continuity crisis. So instead of having to rely on the government to look for the funding to be able to finance doses that would also obviously cover our workforce, why don't we step forward and actually put together the financing that could be used to at least cover people that are employed in the consortium, so that government can use its limited resources and budgets for the poor and vulnerable. And so we quickly mobilized the workforce, and it was a very enthusiastic business response. Obviously, we had the same challenge as the government has. It wasn't a money problem, it was really a supply problem. So we were able to mobilize with $25 million. But we knocked on the doors. We arranged meetings with several vaccine makers. Everyone took the meeting. But really, I think the bigger issue that we learned, and it was a failure on our side of the private sector, and I believe the failure on the side of the government, was that it was a failure of planning. We all knew at the start of the pandemic that we would all need vaccines, right? We saw the US government and the EU and other Western nations, last year negotiate vaccine supply agreements. And I think it should have been incumbent on us, whether in the private sector or in the public sector in government, to have stepped in last year and not wait until this year for us to have started trying to negotiate vaccine supply deals. I mean, unfortunately, if someone signed a contract July last year, you try to sign a contract April of this year, you're going to be at the back of the queue. So I think it was a big failure on our part from a planning perspective. We should have learned from the debacle with testing. And so I think for me, the biggest thing moving forward is that we cannot wait for crisis to respond. We need to try to anticipate what the future will look like. And I think that is where the private sector can step in to support the government in doing this. So we are still there, to be honest. We still have the resources. Where we are looking at is going to be if what we are seeing from the US FDA is going to be what's going to happen across the world, where the US FDA is recommending that after 8 months of being vaccinated, you have to go get a booster shot. Then we are going to have a lot of issues, because definitely we don't even have financing to do first round vaccination, let alone think about booster shot vaccination. I think that's where the private sector could actually play a meaningful role in second level vaccination efforts.
Great. Thanks so much, Mr. Roxon. And I think you nailed it right on the head that the pandemic is not only a health crisis, but also a business continuity crisis. That was a good one. If I can move on and start, I'm going to come to you. I've had in development circles questions or arguments about the waiver of the trade-related aspects to intellectual property rights, specifically to the COVID-19 vaccines. I know sometime in May this year, the United States threw their weight behind that. To see how these waivers could be granted to allow countries that wanted to produce these vaccines to be able to do that. Question is that the way to go if we want to upend vaccine nationalism and work with WTO, WHO, and maybe some strong global advocates to get these waivers that will allow countries to begin production? Is that the way to go?
Firstly, an IP waiver is only one aspect. It's the first step, let me put it that way, to solving the problem. So we're working off the premise that the best and most effective way of of mitigating vaccine nationalism, the uneven distribution of vaccines globally, is by building local capacities and eventually integrating into the drug substance itself. So an IP waiver is the first step. What is more important, though, is technology transfer partnerships, know-how transfer, and also some of the skills transfers that are required. An IP waiver doesn't necessarily get you that. It's the trigger for that. But the next steps that you need to follow through are the more important ones, which is, of course, receiving the technology through tech transfer partnerships and the know-how. And only then, when you're in that position, the know-how infers many different things. It involves where you get your inactive excipients from, what equipment and machinery you use. It involves many other aspects which might not be apparent if you just receive the intellectual property or the rights to the intellectual property. So we certainly need a more comprehensive solution along the lines of what I've outlined. Ultimately, that can be achieved through a licensing arrangement. And you would have heard, of course, that Aspen is in the process of pursuing licensing discussions with Johnson & Johnson. That would give Africa access to its own vaccine, because then we are not saddled by a position where we cannot determine the allocation and or the distribution of these vaccines. If you own a license and you're producing your own vaccine, you can then determine the destiny of that vaccine and which markets it should be transported and or distributed to.
Thank you, Doc, for that submission again. Let me move to Dr. Nsiasare. I guess, enlighten us. How is Ghana going about our processes to set up our own, I guess, vaccine production plant and potentially producing for the region? What is the approach? Is this government-led? And are there any successes in the near term that we are seeing?
Thank you very much. Our approach is a committee which is in place from all the necessary stakeholders. And what we've done is that we have come out of a roadmap. And the roadmap has divided it into short term, which is up to 2 years, a medium term, and a long term. What we want to do is quickly in the short term, Ghana has very good pharmaceutical industry, which has penetrated into the sub-region. So some of the pharmaceutical companies have come together as a consortium. And I'm also very happy, and I'm happy to announce that we'll be working closely together of GIZ, MEC, and this also have a consortium of other German organizations. The German government through the GIZ is assisting Ghana to put everything in place. They get what is a consultant who work together with us. So in the short term, what we want to do is to set up a fill and finish plant to do COVID vaccines. And at the same time, we also want to try and install one of the pharmaceutical companies wants to install a fill and finish anti-snake cell. And we want to strengthen our research and development in the country because we want to move into proper vaccine, candidate vaccine in Ghana. And we are also upgrading our Food and Drugs Authority. As you are aware, our Food and Drugs Authority is a maturity level 3, WHO maturity level 3. We want to help them to set up a lot release system. And in all these cases, we need also the technology transfer, which Star Wars spoke about. And in the short term also, we are now building multilateral partnership, especially, as I said, with the German organizations, and we want to establish technology transfer through this partnership. And then we are working together with GIPC to assist us for the private-led companies to source private capital for the project. So government is giving the enabling environment for the private sector to lead. So it's a private sector-led system that we are running. And we are engaging stakeholders like Gavi, CEPI, UNICEF, and WHO of the outlook on the market shaping and the off-taker mechanism. Already, government has given off-taker to the consortium to be able to start this fill and finish manufacturing, and we want to also penetrate the sub-region to be able to get the off-taker. And we are also very much interested in the human resources capacity building. We want to build a human capital for all these things. Going forward, in the medium term, within the next 5 years, what we want to do is to strengthen whatever we have put in place, strengthen research and development through the universities and the research organizations in the country, and upgrade our Food and Drugs Authority to about level 4 maturity to be able to regulate whatever we are doing. And then we will continue the bilateral and multilateral partnership. We will strengthen it to make sure that this thing also works, and then build on their human resources. What we want to do is in the long term that Ghana will have a candidate vaccine, not only COVID vaccine, but all the other EPI vaccines that we use. So we will continuously strengthen our research and development to be able to have our pathogen isolated from the beginning of vaccine production, from the isolation of the pathogen to fill and finish and packaging. This is what we are trying to do to make sure that we will become a vaccine manufacturing hub. Luckily, the government has given us promised a seed money or given seed money through Emmanuel's outfit, about 25 million to do this. And we are working closely together with other organizations, like the EU is very much interested. I know AU, working closely together with AU, we're joining all their Zoom conferences to make sure that we position ourselves in a way. What I would say is that doing all these things, in order not for African countries to act as if we are competing, there are a lot of vaccines that are used, especially childhood vaccines. And I believe that every economic sub-region should concentrate in some few vaccines for Africa. Once you get a big market, then we can then have a very viable vaccine manufacturing so that we can go ahead and do our own vaccines. The population of about 1.2 billion should be able to have our own vaccines now. And this, I'm very happy to see that our roadmap is completely ready. We've also gone through our charter formation so that we want to take it through cabinet to parliament so that it becomes something which will be established. We are establishing the National Vaccine Institute, which will work with the private sector to make sure the private sector go into this production. This is how we are going about it. And this is what we think within the next 2 years, at least we shall have the first fill and finish vaccine in this country. We have the people, we have the regulators, and then we have also the universities which are well versed in all these things. We have universities who are working for the West Africa sub-region and Africa sub-region, which can assist, because we are already doing genomic sequencing, so we can isolate viruses and pathogens and then develop them into vaccines. Thank you.
Okay, great. The National Vaccines Institute sounds like a good way to go, if you ask me, if we are to upend the vaccine nationalism. And again, I guess you make a strong point about countries specializing in types of vaccines, such that it does not become an international competition to produce the same kind of vaccine. Mr. Roxon, if I could come to you, I guess you are an expert in finding money for whether it's for buying vaccines or I guess helping to set up vaccine production plants. My question then to you will be that how do you advise that African governments go about mobilizing financing for these PPP partnerships, whether it's towards purchasing vaccines or setting up production plants? And where do you think these opportunities lie? How do we get funding to get these things going?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, I think there are some very practical steps that can be taken. One is that we need to reassure investors that we are not just being spurred by the moment, because everyone is talking about COVID, So it is the newest thing in town to talk about. That is a long-term commitment. I mean, you look at the mRNA technology that has been built for over a decade. It is, yes, it was able to make the COVID vaccine in record time, but that doesn't mean that the technology was just built in 9 months. You know, you had investors that had pumped in capital for over a decade into Moderna, into, you know, BioNTech in Germany, and that technology became relevant for being able to make the COVID vaccine. So first and foremost, I think there has to be a long-term plan, and I'm glad that, you know, there's a plan to build a national vaccine institute that is entrenched in the national development plan that goes beyond any one political party, right? Because that gives investors confidence that this would go beyond and outlive any existing government that is there. The second would be that we enshrine these contracts in what you've said, the offtake agreements, right? Because as an investor, I am willing to invest to create production if there is the belief that if I create this production, there's going to be demand for the production I've created. And so where this offtake agreements need to happen is that it doesn't have to be on a country by country basis. It would be great to see an ECOWAS offtake agreement. It would be great to see a SADC offtake agreement, whereby you are able to ensure that, you know, once we invest in this production, and trust me, once you have that offtake agreement, the capital to go into production will be there. The challenge, though, is that up until now, most African governments have never really allocated funding for vaccine purchase. I mean, even our EPI programs are funded from Gavi, right? So how would we show that moving forward, there's actually domestic mobilization from governments, that when you leave Gavi funding, and Ghana will very soon, for example, mature from Gavi, that there's actually local domestic financing sources that can go into taking these vaccines that are produced. And then finally, one mechanism that would provide confidence is if the government can provide, for example, an instrument to say that, you know, we will protect investors against any losses, right? We don't expect it to fail, but, you know, this is going to be risk capital, right? If we are going to be manufacturing new candidates, you know, right? It's not about, you know, taking an existing candidate and manufacturing, or moving to research and things fail, right? And the confidence, that's one of the great things, for example, CEFI did with COVID, where CEFI said, we'll provide risk capital, right? You know, if it fails, we won't take our money. But if it succeeds, then obviously you move forward with it. So I think if we can put these instruments in place, mobilizing domestic funding is not going to be, I mean, we are awash with capital in the private markets right now, right? And we have money looking for great ideas. The question has always been whether the political and regulatory framework is strong to protect an investor like me, that my capital would not go to waste. If, for example, the government wakes up tomorrow and there's a new thing that they are focused on because COVID is no longer the talk of town.
Thank you so much, Greg. Again, the emphasis you made there is that it's not a funding challenge, but I guess the entire ecosystem of support for the private sector to thrive as well. So I think we've done about 30 minutes of discussions already. And again, let me thank the three of you, Dr. Anthony Nsia Asare, Mr. Gregory Roxon, and Dr. Stavros Nicolaou, for this, I guess, opportunity to get your thoughts on how we can append vaccine nationalism. We're going to go into the Q&A section, and so viewers, please join us there. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Do have a great afternoon. God bless.